Welcome back to Outnumbered. Well, is the White House tone deaf? That's what many are asking after this from White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest when asked yesterday about something that President Obama said in an interview about climate change. Listen.
The president's saying, as he seems to be implying here, that the threat of climate change is greater than the threat of terrorism.
I think, John, the point that the president is making is that there are many more people on an annual basis who have to confront the impact, the direct impact on their lives of climate change or on the spread of a disease than on terrorism.
Oh, yeah. You heard that right. The president, according to his spokesman, believes drastic changes to the environment pose a bigger threat in the daily lives of Americans than terrorism. And those remarks coming the same day we learned of the death of Kayla Mueller, the fourth American to die in the hands of ISIS since last summer. Harris, how many Americans have died from climate change?
Well, I can't give you an exact number.
700 million. It's 850 million, Kennedy. Wow. There have been beheadings by the climate. Yes.
You know that facetious.
Of course, Harris, you should know me better by now.
You're also making the same facetious point that I have read made, and that's that climate change cannot dress up, cross continent borders, look like a neighbor, plan, plot, sit in the cut, and then blow something up.
But that's Harris.
You've heard the president in drought-stricken California saying that these weather emergencies, in effect, are creating the conditions that government has to act.
David, I think that what it brings to mind is how we utilize the information that we have. And we all know, and I think that Bill would probably agree with this, neither he nor I are a climate scientist. He is an engineer and actor. I am a member of Congress. And what we have to do is look at the information that we get from climate scientists. As you said,
so she did something which is very common in the climate denier community, or whatever you would call it, is to talk about credentials. So Marsha Blackburn, representative in the U.S. Congress from Tennessee, said, well, I'm a congresswoman, and Bill, you're just a mechanical engineer, so you're not really a climate scientist. And what I would say is, what we're talking about in this level of climate science is you don't need to be a full-time climate scientist to understand it. Furthermore, as far as my credentials, everybody, I'm a mechanical engineer. I took a lot of physics. All I did was take physics. And when you're done with formal physics, then you take mechanical engineering, which is just applied physics. Okay, I get it. I can understand what's going on. We're putting carbon dioxide in the air at a prodigious rate, and the world's getting warmer, and you can know this by looking at the neutrons in the ice. You can know this by looking at the pollen grains per cubic centimeter in the sediment of ponds.
Every day for the next 35 years, an average of 170,000 people will move to or be born in cities in the developing world, mostly in fast-growing areas in Asia and Africa. And there's a lot to love about cities. They're chock full of jobs, art, jobs, community, a small fortune in coins tossed in public fountains, and jobs. Cities can be good for the planet, too. Their compact nature means that water, power, building materials, transportation, and land can be used super efficiently. Except cities aren't always the super compact islands of utopian awesome we sometimes imagine. That's because they're usually made up of urban cores surrounded by less dense residential, commercial, and industrial zones that sprawl on and 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 on. Many of us may think of the suburbs as leafy green lanes lined with picket fences and giant slobbery dogs, but suburbia comes in many forms, and people in suburbs of all types gobble up more energy, water, and other resources and emit more pollutants than those people in taller, denser, urban neighborhoods. They travel further to work and school, have more cars and drive them further, heat and cool bigger homes, and maintain bigger yards, negating the compact efficiency of the dense urban cores they surround. So suburb-ringed cities with low overall density are much less efficient than those that are tightly packed. And unfortunately, cities around the world are expanding twice as fast in area as they are in population, using up more land, more energy, and more stuff per person. We could reverse this trend by getting rid of resource-hungry suburban sprawl altogether, but that just isn't how cities tend to develop organically. In reality, wide highways and cheap gas tend to encourage more cars and commuters, and height limits on buildings or zoning of homes and businesses separately push growth outward. So policies allow us to influence the shapes of our cities, for bad or good. Investing in mass transit and boosting gas prices encourages people to ditch their cars and live closer to each other, while mixed zoning laws allow them to work and play closer to home. And when people live densely, they use resources less intensely. So in cities, as in life, we have a choice: sprawl or grow tall.
Dear food. Dear fruit.
I know you already know this, but I need you.
You bring my family together.
You sweeten my celebrations.
You make my deals.
You satisfy my senses.
And you keep me alive.
But I want to apologize.
Because after all that, you deserve to be eaten.
But instead, I throw away almost half of you. Enough calories to feed 150 million people.
From harvest to home, I waste half of all fruits, vegetables, seafood, and a third of all grains.
I'm better at meat and dairy, wasting only 20%.
But this is a double waste, because essentially, I'm also dumping all the grain or grass the animals ate to make the muscle or milk.
And I waste you in many ways.
For example, sometimes I leave you in a field to die because it costs more to harvest you than you're worth.
Other times, I mistakenly damage, contaminate, or spill you.
Or I reject you when you're imperfect.
Because I judge by appearance.
But mostly I squander you in supermarkets, restaurants, and homes.
When you are so close to being eaten.
I offer too much of you.
So I take too much, and I can't finish you.
Or I can't sell all of you before you go bad.
At home, I forget about you.
Or I cook too much, and I don't know how to store you.
Or maybe I just don't like leftovers.
Part of the problem is that, on average, I spend a smaller fraction of my household budget on you than in any other country or any time in history.
And my spending is spread out over days and weeks, so I don't notice the cost of wasting you.
But my lack of noticing adds up. I devote 4 California's worth of land
and more water than all non-agricultural consumption combined.
Just to grow food that doesn't get eaten.
This is not your fault. It's mine.
Only I can buy less of you and eat more of what I do buy.
Only I can accept your imperfections.
Realize that best before doesn't mean use by.
And store you better.
In general, I need to learn more about you.
Because this is about us and our relationship.
Yo te ayudo a crecer.
And then I eat you.
Anything else is a waste.
Wildlife on Earth is disappearing. In the last century, hundreds of weird and wonderful species went the way of the dodo. Today, over 20,000 more species are at risk of dying out, but we simply don't have the time or resources to rescue them all. It's a tough situation, but not a unique one. Military medics, first responders, and ER workers regularly make decisions like these, and a medical triage-like approach could help us decide which species to save first. For example, we could prioritize those who need help stat, like the last 60 wild Javan rhinos teetering on the edge of extinction. Alternatively, we could take a kind of save the president first approach and focus on species vital to entire ecosystems, like mangroves, since giant pandas aren't nearly as rare as Javan rhinos, nor as critical to their ecosystems as otters or mangroves. Plus, they're such reluctant breeders and their bamboo forests are so fragmented that saving them has already required billions of dollars and may mean keeping the species on permanent life support. And yet these fuzzy-wuzzy bundles of cuteness pull at our heartstrings and our wallets. As the literal faces of conservation, pandas pull in big bucks for wildlife protection. And they do share a little. Money raised by the World Wildlife Fund does go to dozens of conservation projects, but the majority of campaigns fronted by pandas or other charismatic creatures are solely devoted to saving their symbolic species. What's more, keeping the spotlight focused on the plight of a few celebrities means the demise of species with homelier faces. or no faces at all. You've probably never seen a campaign to save the stinking cedar or the pygmy hog-sucking louse. But unlike the celebrities, underdog species like these are often ideal triage candidates. They can be simpler to resuscitate, less expensive to protect, and vital to their ecosystems. Their only flaw is inferior cuteness. Should we really let appearances decide who lives and who dies? Or should we take a more rational approach? The trade-off is this. Thinking rationally when it comes to saving species may mean asking ourselves whether a world without pandas is something we can bear.